Hey, everybody. If you're listening to this, you are listening to the first free hour of this episode of The Shift with Doug McKenty. If you like what you're hearing, please consider subscribing to the show in order to access the full feature-length versions of the podcast, as well as have access to the members forum, where we discuss potential topics and interviews and dive deep into the overall concept of The Shift. For only $6 a month, not only do you get the full-length episodes, but also an opportunity to co-create with me, your host, Doug McKenty, the future of the show. Go to www.theshiftnow.com or patreon.com/theshift and sign up today in order to help make the shift possible. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Good morning, noon, or night, wherever and whenever you are listening to The Shift. I'm your host. My name is Doug McKenty. This episode was recorded on August 25th, 2021. My guest on the show today is prominent liberty activist David Rodriguez out of Santa Cruz, California. David initially hit the scene in collaboration with now deceased education activist John Taylor Gatto, working with John to publish his last book, The Underground History of American Education. He then went on to advocate for alternatives to public education as the founder of the Education Options Expo and the Valor Academy, providing information to families seeking an alternative to public schooling. Currently, David is working on the Gatto Project, designed to help teenagers accelerate graduation and connecting them with apprenticeship programs, teaching life skills outside the forced schooling paradigm. Over the past 18 months, David has also organized and engaged in a series of actions designed to raise awareness concerning the issue of public health strategies in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Utilizing civil disobedience, he has been handing out free maskless hugs and defying lockdown curfews by hosting maskless beach parties in defiance of government mandates. He has also participated in group maskless shopping sprees, garnering national attention. His freedom advocacy has resulted in legal action, and David has recently spent 14 days in jail and is currently awaiting the opportunity to defend his actions in court. On top of the anti-lockdown advocacy, David has also promoted the cause of the human right to travel by protesting the many government-imposed restrictions on automobile ownership and use, as well as working with Thick Red Line activist Howard Lichtman by advocating for police education and supporting their right to act out of personal moral principle rather than following the letter of the law, which often requires the use of unjust violence in service to the state apparatus. Enjoy this conversation, which will cover not only the critical topics concerning the importance of freedom in education, but will also encompass a larger conversation about the inherent violence of the state and the steps that can be taken to create a future based on voluntary action and the non-aggression principle. Find out more about the work of David Rodriguez on YouTube at The Freedom Lovers Show, and watch for the up-and-coming release of the Gatto Project at www.gattoproject.com. for news and information concerning alternatives to public education. If you like what you're hearing, please like, subscribe, and share this podcast throughout your social media networks. We rely on listeners like you to distribute this information. As always, go to www.theshiftnow.com to sign up for the newsletter, subscribe for feature-length episodes of the show, and find hours of free content, including the public health news and information program, The Facts and the Fiction, as well as the Psychology of Lockdown series. Without further ado, I'd like to thank freedom activist David Rodriguez for his appearance on the program, and thank you for helping to make the shift. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this 90th episode of The Shift. I'm happy today to be joined by David Rodriguez. David has been a champion in the homeschool movement for a number of years now. I'm really happy to have him on because he sort of picked up the mantle from John Taylor Gatto, whom I had the great pleasure of interviewing quite a while ago now, probably 10 years ago, and he has since passed away. So it's going to be a really exciting conversation, and I've been wanting to cover homeschooling, of course, for quite some time, as it is such an integral part of liberating ourselves from the state in the big picture of things. And David has also been very active during the lockdown period out of Santa Cruz, California, in terms of fighting the mask mandates, fighting the lockdowns, and he's even gotten himself in a bit of legal trouble recently in dealing with all of that. So thanks a lot for coming on the show, David. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You want to give people just a little bit of your background and where you came from and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, it's a long story, Doug, but thanks for having me on the show. I think freedom is the issue of our lifetime. And, we kind of got linked up, I guess, through maybe John Taylor Gatto's work. And that's probably a good place to start because as I was on my journey of life, many of you listeners and audience members, what an exciting thing it is to be alive, to be a human being. And after you go through public school, as I did, and many of you out there, you
Hmm.
get in the real world and you're like, what is going on in these schools? what are the bells about? What is happening? And so I was kind of interested in that. And then I started getting into success books, success training, these, higher questions that were interesting to me. And then I met a mentor of mine, and he said, because I was chasing money, and there's nothing wrong with money, but I was kind of pursuing something greater or more fulfilling for me. And he said, "What is your mission on this earth, or what are you doing here?" And I said, "I don't know." Make
Right.
money? I don't know. That's what I was taught in school. And so, anyways, I looked into it. I found out that once you have a certain amount of money, whether whether the million, 10 million, a billion, whatever, at some point you're like, okay, we got money taken care of. So now what are we after? And now it's about purpose. Now it's about what do we what do we come to do to fulfill our legacy or our intention when we got here? So, anyways, I started getting into these kind of things, and he said, if you had $10 million, what would you do tomorrow? I said, well, I don't know. So I started thinking about this question for a while. And another mentor of mine, a billionaire, he said, find an injustice on earth and spend your life trying to correct that injustice. And
Right.
I said, wow, that was impressive. So I thought, what's the one of the injustices that cut me in my heart or just really upset me? And I was like, school kind of seems weird. And I think I learned about Charlotte Iserbyt and John Taylor Gatto. And anyway, so I learned about the school system, how it was designed to create obedient soldiers and consumers and clerks and order followers. And I was not okay with that.
Hmm.
So I learned that John Gatto was kind of the shining star, the courageous school teacher who won the state teacher of the year twice, had courage to go out and speak that truth. I reached out to him, asked if I could promote his work, and kind of, I wasn't trying to get into business with him, but I just was tired of seeing these libraries in multiple cities around the country that were titled the Horace Mann School or the Horace Mann Library. They're in every major city, and many of you know Horace Mann was the guy from Massachusetts who imported the Prussian school system in 1852. So
Right.
here they are iconizing or creating legacy for this guy who created slavery for kids. And slavery might be a rough word, but I call it a day prison. But slavery is not that far off, in my opinion. And so, anyways, I reached out to him. He asked me to help him out. I helped him out. Started getting involved with him, and then I started something called the Education Options Expo, which turned into a YouTube channel because the great Buckminster Fuller quote is that you never change reality by fighting against something. You got to create a new model that makes the old model obsolete. So rather than try to reform the system or bring the system down, I just want to have other options. So I started that event. We did that for a few years. And in that time period, also helped John Gatto republish The Underground History of American Education, Volume 1. And we have two more volumes coming. And then just kept doing my kind of self growth and started getting into more freedom events. Anarchapulco is a great event down in Mexico, and we'll
Hmm.
talk about volunteerism and stuff later here. So that's kind of the essence of it. I grew up in a small town in California and came down to the big city, and was going to go explore the world. And you find out the world is a small place. I sold a health insurance business when I was 26 and moved to Korea for a year, and also was kind of pursuing some spiritual interests. And then when it comes down to it, it seems that freedom is the whole ball game. And we can get into some of my court stuff if we want to. I was kidnapped and put in jail for 2 weeks, and in that period, the three conclusions which became very clear is that freedom is number one on this earth. my life is number two, and love is number three. So, you're sitting in this cage for non-violent offenses and literally just asking the judge questions. So, anyways, this is about freedom, my friends, and you are the chosen ones. Doug is awesome creating this content. John Gatto, all these people out there, and there's just a great awakening happening. So that's why I'm inspired to be with you today, Doug, to talk about what's happening, some of the solutions, where we can go, and how each of us make a difference. Because just that little thing that I reached out to John Gatto got me into business with him and changed my trajectory and helped me step into my personal power in some ways. And so that's really what these hyper wealthy psychopaths are afraid of, is us activating ourselves. And so it's really just exciting here to be with you. And that's the quick, short version.
Right. Well, thanks for coming on. Why don't we get into a little bit about your voluntarism? Just because then we can connect that back into the whole education concept. I think education is so important, and a free education is so important in a free society. The idea of having the state educate all of us and then thinking we're all going to go vote from our hearts, when we've all been taught exactly the same stuff that was handed down to us all from just a handful of people, just seems crazy for me. And the idea that if everybody learns the same thing all across the country, I mean, how is this promoting diversity? How is this promoting local culture? So many issues with it, but let's just kind of lay the foundation in terms of the libertarianism or the voluntarism. I think I was reading that you were influenced by Ron Paul. Was he kind of an initial influence to you, or how did that political philosophy develop in your life?
Yeah, so I studied success, and then I saw him in the 2008 presidential debate, and he says, "I'm champion of the Constitution." I said, "I love that word champion. This is inspiring. It's great." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Who's this guy?" Right? And so I started following him in 2008. Crushed it and all the fundraising stuff, and then 2012 looks like he had the election stolen in some states.
Yeah, looks like.
and media doesn't give you any fair shake at all. And I'm like, this is not the way to cause change. This is a great way to get the ideas out there. And so I got a lot of respect for him, what
Hmm.
he did. And then 2015, I attended the first in Acapulco, and I had been learning a little bit about Rothbard, and he was kind of the main influence. I met Mark Larkin and Rose later, but the fact is that we're all equal, and nobody has authority to rule you or rule me. And what's amazing about the Declaration of Independence is that it says the just powers of government come from the consent of the governed. And what if I never consented? What if you never consented? Where do they get their just powers? And so, Lysander
Right.
Spooner was a big one also, the Constitution of No Authority from 1870. This amazing author and entrepreneur lawyer articulated that the government is just a gang of individuals. And he had such amazing stories and metaphors how to explain it so that, simple guy like me could understand. And so I went down to Acapulco 2015. I had learned about Jeff Berwick, and just I was getting into inspirational events. You go to events, you meet people. It's an exciting place to go where the people are interested in what you're interested in. So there was 120 people there that year, and I attended 6 years in a row, and it went from 120 to like 350 to 650 to 1200. And I think at the height it was like 1,700 people, all voluntarious people who just want to conduct business, conduct life on a voluntary, consensual basis. And it was so amazing. It was there on the beach. And so I started learning about the critical things called the self-ownership principle, where you own your body and nobody has claimed your body, and the non-aggression principle, where you can do whatever you want as long as you don't harm somebody or their property or threaten them, and just uphold your contracts, and self-defense, that you're allowed to defend yourself. If somebody's attacking you or your property, you're justified to defend yourself, and then you just have to accept the consequences of your actions. And that was kind of the beginning, was realizing this is a worldwide awakening. And I say that so people can really understand that I'm not trying to blow, air up our skirts or something like this. But the first year, it was amazing. I attended by myself. So I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna go hang out with these freedom people, see what's going on. And the day before the conference starts, I'm there. It's like 80 degrees, slight breeze, like it is always in Acapulco. And some young dude comes up and he's like, "Hey, man, are you here for an Acapulco?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am, man. I'm just got here today." And he's like, "Hey, a few of us are on the beach right over here, because I was at the pool. They were at the beach right over there. You want to come join us?" I'm like, "Yes. What's up, man?" So I went down there. There were 7 guys, all from 7 different countries. It was Portugal, Russia, Norway, like
Wow.
unbelievable. And I'm like, all you guys came from your country by yourself to this event? And they're like, yes. So wow. So there's a big thirst and desire to learn about this stuff and how to expand it and grow. Because once you realize the left right paradigm is a scam, it doesn't matter the blue team, the red team, they're all trying to enslave us. They're all trying to take our money. And even with the Agenda 21 stuff, it's like these guys got 30, 50, 70-year plans. So humanity is awakened to it now. And, with 9/11 being such a sloppy job on building 7 at, no plane hit and just imploded into itself, you're like, oh, wow, this is very exciting. So that was kind of my introduction to see Ron Paul, have that tap into him and then go to these events. And then I started meeting other people, Mark
Hmm.
Passio, Larkin Rose, I mentioned. And I'm like, wow, dude, these are some of the best people that I've met. They're not perfect, but I started to get hope again because this is one thing they do is they try to remove hope from you. And you just, oh,
Absolutely.
yeah. So it's the art of war. Um, Sun Tzu, right? The supreme art of war is to defeat your enemy without fighting him. And so that's where a lot of people are at right now, I think, as we're talking about this scamdemic here in August 2021. But I have some kind of new inspiration that we can share throughout the conversation. But that was my introduction to it. And
Hmm.
I mean, just the beauty of freedom, I think, is so exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, it's been something that I have seen build over the last 5 or 10 years. I've probably been a voluntarist since the mid '90s, and I don't think I even met another one, for like 10 years.
That's right.
And it's been well with the internet really coming online and having places to kind of gather virtually, and then with an Acapulco, it's definitely been picking up steam, and more people are talking about it. And one of the things that I've kind of been thinking about lately is how many people who are voluntarists then like are awakened to, I guess what you would say is the broader conspiracy in terms of how politics and the banking system really works. Do you want to comment on some of that? I think those principles that you were mentioning about self ownership and non aggression, if you really believe in those things and you start to observe the way the world works right now, it's just a lot easier, I think, for that veil to fall and be able to kind of go, why do banks work this way? Who's controlling the money? What is the government doing? And having those questions and looking for answers, and then eventually going down a lot of different rabbit holes, I think, like I did and like you did, to really finding out that there's something completely different going on in this world than you're hearing on the mainstream news, right?
That's right. Yeah. Well, the banking system is probably the number one. I mean, G. Edward Griffin came to the event as well, and he has
Nice.
his own Red Pill Expo. And he wrote, the Creature from Jekyll Island. And he exposed the creation of the Federal Reserve banking system. And you're like, my gosh. So, I mean, Ed Griffin is a champion, man. He's like in Ron Paul's league. And I mean, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. So this is the concept called intergenerational freedom, which I spoke about in 2019 at Anarcha Vegas, because
Hmm.
Anarcha Vegas was kind of spawned from Anarchapulco. But the financial system is how they fund all this. And I didn't learn this through business college or school, but through own personal research and looking and
Right.
following smarter people than me. And, like, how does this work? In 1971, Nixon takes us off the gold standard. What does that mean? Well, that means they can print the money now. They don't have to actually tax the people, because to fund wars, as America is the military, I should say the global military force on the planet, they got to fund these guys. They got to pay these guys. So how do you pay over 1 million soldiers?
Right.
Well, you have to print money and sell bonds and all this cockamamie financial, charades
Did
that
you
the politician. Mhm.
Well, I was just going to say, not to interrupt, but did you see the meme? I think it was what happened in 1971, and then it had this graph of the value of the working class, uh, how much money the working class was getting paid over the course of time compared to the upper classes. And it's basically kind of going up and up and up as productivity increases until 1971. And exactly that day when Nixon pulled the dollar off the gold standard, all of a sudden it basically flatlines and workers stopped. Our standard of living basically hasn't really improved relative to the economy since 1971, and all of the extra productivity that with the creation of the internet and the personal computer and all of that, that's all that money's getting sucked up into the upper classes now. So anyway, it was just a quick meme it was tweeted out, and I saw it a couple of times a few days ago. And it just really hit home exactly how important it was to have the dollar at least pegged to something so that it had real value. Because as soon as that happened, as soon as it just became a complete fiat currency, then, look what's happening right now. Last year they spent what, $4 trillion, and then now they're going to pass this infrastructure bill, and it's going to be another 4 trillion. Like, where do you make money like that? It's just nuts.
So the audience members, all you do is like go and file print on your computer and printing out real money. That's literally what these guys are doing. They're printing money.
Yeah.
And so this is why you kind of refer to the standard of living. Purchasing power of the dollar has gone down. I think it's gone down like 98%, 97% since 1913 when the Federal Reserve was created.
Yeah.
And the Federal Reserve is not federal and it has no reserves. It's just a bunch of cartel banksters who got together. I think they took 10 or 15 years to get that Federal Reserve Act passed on Christmas Eve in 1912, right? These guys are scammers, man, from the highest level. And they were able to do that because they controlled the newspapers, the radio when that came out, and all the media. Mm-hmm. And that's why mainstream television right now is your place for disinformation. Anybody who thinks they're getting any legitimate information from these news outlets, these basically marketing PR agencies for these mega corporations, they're being deceived. However, because of the internet and because of producers like you and hundreds of thousands, maybe people out there, millions, we're getting the information now.
Yeah.
And after maybe the second year at Anarchapulco, like it was, like I said, like 250, 300 people there. Now you get together, you're having a great time. You're talking about the Federal Reserve, the school system, the medical system, all these things with people that you just met. You're like, this is awesome. And then eventually you're like, what is the solution, man? Because you see the tyranny come. We saw it come in 2015 and 16.
Right.
And, with the forced vaccines in schools, that's why I was so passionate about the schools, because I saw the documentary Vaxxed, how the top CDC scientists were cooking the data, which showed that African-American boys were having a higher proclivity and outcome of autism. And so they literally scrapped the data, and some whistleblower came out and made a great film. I met Brandy Vaughn from learntherisk.org, who she recently passed away mysteriously. So it's that time, my friends, where the cat is out of the bag for 25 years. The media has controlled the minds of so many people, and now we can see them. And this is where I think the drama of this lifetime is that it's a race between slavery and freedom. We outnumber those guys, and they just have money. They have money. They can buy things, buy people, but the real spirit of freedom and love and courage and peace and harmony, that is what we're fighting for, actually, in my opinion. And we just have to embody it and embrace that. And it's not also, this is a side note here related to the financial system, but it's not outside of us. It is the man in the mirror. And this is why I started getting like, okay, what's the solution? The solution is me. And after I went to all these events and I was going there, and you kind of go as like a fan, right? You go as a fan, you're like, oh, I got to meet these people, or, do that. And they're all great people. And then after you meet them all and you talk with them, you realize everybody is doing the best that they can with the knowledge, awareness, and consciousness that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you reach them, and so this is, I think, the third year I became the speaker liaison, and that's actually when I met Foster Gamble the first time,
Cool.
helping out the organizers, because it's hard to organize a bunch of kings and queens and people who know they're free, and you can't boss me around. So how do you find harmony? How do you create win-win outcomes? And then by 2018, I actually shared the stage with Ron Paul. I opened up for Ron Paul. It was amazing.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah, he packed the room with like 1,500 people, and I went on right before him. And thank you, Nathan Freeman, rest in power, and Jeff Berwick for that. But like, just wanting to be free, wanting to add value, wanting to contribute is what this movement and what the world needs right now. It's bigger than the movement. It's this world. And so in terms of the financial system, yeah, these guys have been funding it. They've been hiding. They've been buying off the editors. They're part of their secret society, Skull and Bones, Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission. Is unbelievable what these guys have done. And now the emperor has no clothes. We can see them. And so the question is solutions. And this is where we have to, look at what we can do as individuals. And I think it's smart to think long term, but then to act in short term. It's kind of this dichotomy of today is the gift, today is the day, and I think we'll live a long time as well. So how to balance the two. But yeah, the financial system is a critical part, because that's how they fund it all. The school system is a $700 billion business a year business. So it's like they're just printing money there. But the war machine is really the big one. And, because the schools get their money from property taxes, which is another form of extortion. And I can't believe people just accept it. But I think people are getting to the point where they're not going to take it anymore. And, I have a few ideas for how they might be able to resolve that.
Right. That is another point about the property taxes. I mean, again, going back to the principles, like I think libertarian-minded people, voluntarists, really have these principles, and they say, like, it is unethical to, impose violence on another human being in order to force your way upon them. And the idea that you can't even be protected as the owner of your own piece of property anymore, but that they have property tax. I actually consider it a big. I often see the way that the upper classes kind of trick us. I think a lot of times, like, for example, just with socialism in general, which a lot of people, really well-meaning people believe in socialism. But I find, you mentioned Anthony Sutton in one of your interviews that I was listening to prior to this. I did an interview with Patrick Wood about how the upper classes actually fund socialism and communism, because it's precisely a way to centralize the means of production, and they know that they're going to be the guys that control the system. Of course, they sell it as the people are going to own it, but who are the people, right? It's the people who are in power that control things, and so it's kind of a way to trick. And the property tax thing with public education was the same. It was like a trick, like, oh, just we'll give you all this free education and you'll love it as long as you pay us property taxes, which of course means now we're renting our property from the government, and no one ever actually owns their own property and has their own, not the king or queen of their own castle, as they used to say, anymore. We're just renters. And just what a huge scam that was. What a trick that they played on the people, and the people fell for it, unfortunately, and now they're not even safe in their own homes. So
it's cracking down now. And to relate to what you call the scam, a friend of mine actually wrote a book, and it lays all this out, easy to understand, with pictures, explaining the media,
right?
The violence. Called, oh yeah, you had him on your show.
Yep.
18 Love Way.
Yep. We've talked about that. So
yeah, amazing. Yeah, government, the biggest scam in history exposed.
Right.
So so that type of media is coming out, and it takes courage to have these conversations. And eventually these guys are just going to be exposed, and who knows? I mean, I would not want to be these guys who are, they're having their names put out there. I just saw this Sydney Bishop, I think it was, from Australia, come out and say Gates can jab himself with the vaccine. No, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, they can do it, right? George Soros can do it. So people realize what time it is, and it's freedom time. in my opinion, right? It's time to speak for freedom, speak for truth. I know you have to do it, strategically for certain people. But if somebody's independent out there, I recommend you speak it and shine it from the mountaintop, because we've just been disorganized over the last few generations. We've been comfortable, and God bless our parents and grandparents, right? They
Yeah.
did the best that they could. And now we are shared with this information, and it is that time to shine the light and somehow find the love and compassion for these guys. I know that's hard because some of these guys are really sinister dudes. I think at the highest level with this whole vaccine agenda, they're playing the game of death. And it's just, what do you say to somebody who knows they're playing the game of death? Some of the nurses don't know, the doctors don't know, whatever.
Sure.
But at the highest level, they know exactly what they're doing. And just like we know what we're doing, we want to promote voluntary, consensual relationships and peace and cooperation. And they are openly, coercing, forcing peaceful people to inject toxic chemicals, knowing it's going to kill them. So, I mean,
Right.
I have to increase my compassion for these guys because it's like the human or the primal instinct in me really wants to take vengeance on these guys. But is violence the solution here? I don't know. Some people might say yes, some people might say no. But I do know that we have to build the world that we want to see,
Yeah.
and it's not going to come from the politicians.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, and I've been voluntarious for a long time, but only in the last couple of years have I been introduced to the work of Samuel Conkin through guys like Derek Burrows, and then I talked to Sal Mayweather just 2 weeks ago, I guess now, about the concept of agorism. And the cool thing about that is that instead of thinking that you have to like fight the system in order to create political change, you just can actually kind of come to the realization that you are actually free. I mean, it's all the slavery is mental slavery, really. And if you just come to the idea and the notion, even with there's statism all around, there's violence, there's taxation, there's the corporate system. You can choose not to participate, and you can choose to be free in your own mind. And it kind of takes a lot of that negativity or that need for the feeling of revolution or something's got to change that's outside of my control in order to kind of live this life, when you can actually just in your own mind recognize that freedom is a choice that you can make for yourself, and then disengage from the system as much as possible. I mean, that's essentially what you've been doing, right, David?
Right. It is. And I mean, the next evolution is the mental revolution, right? To realize that we are free,
Yeah.
and, all these licenses and permits and all these things are immaterial. They're just threats. And I know a few doctors who have let their licenses expire, and a lot of respect for these guys, San Diego and New York. It's
Right.
literally a piece of paper that they use to control you doctors out there or anybody. And this is why I've been doing the right to travel stuff for about 3 years, because I found out that the driver's license is for commerce, for hire. That means Uber, UPS, FedEx, these companies that use the public roads for commerce, they need a license. But you and I, in our private car, using the road for private matters, we don't need a license. So I've been doing that. I've had few arrests, few tows, and much of it's been on video recorded. So I got a video camcorder on my dash cam dashboard, so I can document it, because all I know is that it's freedom time and I have to shine my light, and I want to test it out. So I tested it out. I
Mm.
put my plates back on because I was being targeted down here in Santa Cruz, and we can talk about that if you want. We can talk about the right to travel stuff, but it's a license. And so the reason that they are so controlling, when they pull you over and they say license, registration, and insurance, that's what the cops have been trained to do, not what's the law, right? Because it's a code. Okay, a code is not the law. It only applies to people, government officers, corporate employees, or corporate officers, government employees, and people participating in regulated activity. That's not me. It's probably not many of you guys out there, but they don't tell the officers that. So when the officer's on the side of the road and he says, give me your identification. You were speeding. And I said, I'll be happy to identify myself if you suspect me of committing a crime. Oh, yeah, it's a crime. What's a crime? Speeding. Who's the victim? The state of California. What's that? I'm not going to argue with you.
Right.
So I said, I'm not arguing. I'm asking you who is the victim. I'm happy to identify myself. Right. This is
Yeah.
called a conditional acceptance. I'm not refusing. I'm happy to do it, but please tell me who I've harmed or what the victim is. And so, God bless these guys. I know I have had some friends who are cops and played sports with these dudes. They're not evil dudes. Again, they're kind of the compartmentalized guys who don't know they're part of enslavement process. As ATN said, government is a tool of tyranny, just like the church, used to be a tool of tyranny, or maybe still is, to mind control people. Because if the government comes out with guns, it's very obvious to see those are the bad guys. But if they come out with paper, and now with this totalitarian takeover, with the attempt, with the vaccine stuff, is we're trying to help you. It's for your own health.
That's
wear the
that
mask,
scam
get the
again, right?
jab.
That scam, yeah. It's
Yes.
always hidden behind this belief that they're helping you. And my God, if nobody had driver's licenses, it would just be mayhem out there in the streets. And
Right.
but again, I mean, you mentioned another one of these principles, and this is the thing that keeps popping up for me, because there are so few of us that seem to be able to kind of see this bigger picture of. And I don't know that I want to call it a conspiracy. That term conspiracy theory has kind of been foisted upon us, but our interpretation of history kind of recognizes that these rich, very, very rich people have a lot of control over our daily lives in a way that they shouldn't. And I think a lot of it has to do, because I've been trying to actually get away from the left-right paradigm for so long, and I have seen some people come into the quote-unquote conspiracy theory world from the left, especially I think when it became obvious that Bernie Sanders, that election, that primary was rigged, right, against Hillary. And a lot of progressives were like, wait a minute, they looked into it, they saw the evidence, they started questioning, and that was their rabbit hole. And so, but nonetheless, I've noticed that the vast majority of people that kind of get turned on to, again, this more conspiratorial interpretation of history come from the libertarian angle. And I think what you were describing about that principle of no victim, no crime. If I haven't hurt anyone, then why do I owe restitution to somebody else? Or how can it be argued that I've done something wrong? And you take that to its logical conclusion and you realize, well, you don't, 95% of what the government's doing is creating victimless crime. And when you peel back the layer, you can see, well, who benefits from this? And it's always these same corporate actors or these really rich, individuals that have been kind of controlling the show from behind the curtain. And it's frustrating. I mean, I wish that more people could kind of accept, like the principle of nonviolence. It's an ethical code. It's common sense, really. And if they could take that to its logical conclusion, I think it would be a lot easier for people to see what's going on. But I guess this also ties back to two things. I mean, one, the school question that we're going to get into here pretty in depth. There's so much to talk about, but I really want to focus on this and the other thing that you said too is the sheer amount of propaganda that people are getting fed. So they can't just, they're not seeing things objectively from that common sense perspective because they're getting inundated with this misinformation all the time. And it's so hard for them to believe that, all the journalists or all the doctors or whatever, can be bought into the system, which those guys are just doing, just like the cops. They're all just doing their job. And they don't see what's happening at the top of the corporate pyramid that's really kind of controlling the messaging that people are getting from the time they're in kindergarten for the rest of their lives if they continue to listen to the mainstream media.
Right. Yep. And where it's going is the global totalitarian state. Right now, the mandatory school attendance policies are from age 6 to age 18 in California, and they want to drop it down to age 4. In fact, the state would be happy for you or your lady or your whoever young woman in your life to take the baby directly out of the uterus and start indoctrinating them with statism. They would do it if you moms and dads out there would accept it.
Yeah.
This is how psychopathic the system is. There is no morality to the system. It is based on intimidation, threats, and violence. And as you said, once you can see the principles of non-aggression, which is the number one principle, right, of code of conduct,
Yeah.
and you can see it everywhere. And the reality is that we're all equal. And if I haven't harmed you or your property, I've committed no crime. In fact, without the law, without these codes, murder, rape, and theft are still wrong. So we don't need these guys to say that we need the government because this is they're going to protect us from these things. You mean extort people with their vehicle code violations? I tried to fight one of these. I've actually tried to fight a few of these vehicle code tickets in the past. And I had this service, this like legal service, and the attorney told me, I said, I'm so curious, man. You're in here a lot. How many tickets do you think these guys write? Because it was a carpool violation. They charged me like $400.
Wow.
He says, oh, they write 10 to 20 tickets per day. I was like, oh my, doing the math. It's like $3,000 to $10,000 a day that this guy is out there extorting people, forcing them into contract. And this is what we're learning down here.
Yeah.
We're learning about the law. So the question when you want to ask these people is, do you have the authority to force somebody into a contract? No, you don't. But that's what you cops are doing, because when they pull you over, try this out there, everybody, if you want to. When they pull you over and he says, okay, license, registration, sign this ticket. It's not an admission of guilt. And you say, well, sir, what if I don't sign it? What are you going to do to me? And you will see the tyrant come out in these guys, these nice guys. The light switches in their eyes,
right?
And they'll say it kind of nice. And at some point, they'll say, you will sign it. And you're like, oh. So the point is to expose the violence that they're perpetuating on us. And now you can say, oh,
right.
Now that you let me know that you're going to use violence against a peaceful man, I will comply. You know, and this is not to say that all cops are bad. I did have one incident 6 months ago. No plates on my car, right? I was still doing like the travel stuff. He pulls me over and we had a conversation for back and forth for 15 minutes. It's on video. And I asked him to morally justify using violence on a peaceful man. And actually, before I did that, the first question I asked him, I said, sir, I know you're a good guy. I'm a good guy too. And you found me in peace. And I know you're a peaceful guy. Can we agree on a peaceful resolution today? And he's like, yeah. So we fist pumped each other. We actually ended up fist pumping each other twice. Yeah. And so long story short, he let me go with a verbal warning, you know, about not having plates on my car.
Wow.
And yeah, there was 2 or 3 cop cars that showed up. And that's on my Freedom Law Academy channel. But so there's a way to go about it if we can maintain our own aggression towards these guys, understand that they have been brainwashed intentionally so that they can't verbally defend themselves. All they can do is be violent. And same thing with the doctors. You know, doctors don't learn about nutrition in their medical school, the Rockefeller curriculum medical school, right? They learn about the pharmaceutical drugs. So there's a certain level of compassion that I have for these guys. And because I've been brutalized too in my life, you know, and my mom was a public school teacher. My dad worked for the government. These are good people, but you put them in a system based on coercion. And now good people sometimes do bad things. But the number one thing that they don't talk about is moral principles. And I'm like, a moral compass? What's that? And it's like, oh, just how you determine what's right and wrong on the earth. I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've never heard about this. And I was like in my 20s, you know, It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I know. It is amazing. I mean, the system itself, if it's not, I mean, if it's actually is based on violence. And then when you're dealing with these people, in a lot of cases, you know, certainly with the cops, and then in a lot of cases with the doctors too, who typically don't have the kind of respect for your own bodily autonomy, as we're seeing with this whole vaccine thing. But it's passive aggression. and then eventually you're supposed to just kind of break and go, well, I'm not going to argue with you anymore, and let's just get this over with. And if you don't, it just will escalate into, a violent altercation, not necessarily with the doctors, although, I've seen them strap people down and force medicate people before. So they don't, it doesn't, the system doesn't have that same ethical code. Clearly it thinks that violence is something that it has a right to perpetuate on other people without their consent in circumstances, and they justify it by saying that it's for the good of the community. But as I keep saying this over and over again, people tell me that it's selfish to actually try to inform people before they get the vaccine about some of the side effects that they may not have heard about, and they tell me, don't be selfish, just get the vaccine. And I say, well, informed consent is good for the community. That is what's best for the community. So, you don't want to live in a community that doesn't have that as an ethical principle. And it is just amazing how many people really don't, they don't get it. They don't have that foundation of an understanding that human beings are free and equal. And they don't take that idea to its logical conclusion, which is like, hey, the very fact that they even want to try to do, their solution to the pandemic situation is not to work on early treatment protocols that people can choose of their own free will, but instead to come up with this idea that, like, well, if everybody doesn't do it, then it's not going to work. So we'll just have to force everybody to do it. That's not even a good plan to begin with.
Right. And this is one thing we noticed because we were down here doing free hugs every week for about 40 weeks. We did Saturday bonfires for about 60 weeks in a row. And
Yeah.
The free hugs was very interesting because this is what we're talking about. The brainwashed people, logic doesn't matter to these people. So we were increasing our own vibrational frequency to give love to these brainwashed people.
Yeah.
Because that's all I can do. Like, we're out there, we have free hug signs, 5 or 8, 10 of us. And some people will come up just mad. I can't believe you're out here giving free hugs and da-da. And then we stay very calm. And I ask him, I say, sir, can I ask you a question? Who's responsible for your health? And he says, well, I am, and the community. I say, no, I am
Right.
not responsible for your health. And then another guy, this is crazy. What's going on here? Can I ask you a question? Who's responsible for your health? He says, me and the government. I said, no, the government is not responsible for your health. And one time, and this is a video called Who's Responsible for Your Health that I made, a couple comes up, both masked. Oh, it's really dangerous what you're doing out here. Giving hugs on a voluntary, consensual basis in public is a very dangerous thing. Yes. Okay, man, can I ask you a question? Are you really afraid of a virus that can kill you? Yes. I say, maybe you should stay home.
Yeah.
Instead of coming out in the public and trying to force us to restrict the most essential thing, which is oxygen. And they blur the lines. And this is where they're very strategic at the highest levels. They get in their war rooms and their whiteboards and they work it out. Freedom, the other side of freedom, is personal responsibility. So as kings and queens and people who own our bodies and life, we are responsible for our body and life. But then they'll say, in the signs, you'll notice it says, protect yourself, which is a good thing to say, protect yourself. And then it says, and others. So the question is, how do I protect others? This is like an impossibility.
Yeah.
Just like trying to find the people. Where are we the people? No, I am a man. You're a man. We are individuals. We're the most vulnerable minority on earth. Doesn't matter our skin color, our gender, none of that stuff. It is the individual who is the most vulnerable being on earth. And they put you in a group, and say, oh, you're this guy, or race stuff, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so that's why I find a lot of hope, is because they're trying to separate the lower middle class people who are good, upstanding people and get them confused. But if you take 100% responsibility for your life and then ask people those questions, that's all I can do, right? I can't change these people. And like we've had people come up during free hugs crying because they're like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't been hugged in months, and I can't visit my grandchildren." And this is major terrorism, man. And this is a funny
Yeah.
video that I got interviewed on some local channel last summer, and I was curious if they would publish radical truth in their television station and on their website. And I said, the health department is a terrorist organization because they are terrorizing people, shutting down small businesses, making people afraid of a flu virus, if it's even that. And I was like, they're probably not going to post that. So I recorded it with my buddy there. And they literally led with that story. Like, that's
Wow.
very interesting. Yeah, because I think there might be some good journalists somewhere in these little,
Sure.
networks that are trying to get the polarity of the topics. And then you see now with Biden's administration saying that if you question COVID measures, you could be a potential terrorist. So I think being
Yeah.
accurate with my language is some of the goals that I have, going forward. Because truly, if the county health department and the Senate, the state, the federal government are terrorizing you, that means they are by definition a terrorist. So people who ask questions are not terrorists. It is people who cause terror as a political means of getting stuff done. These guys are terrorists. So, anyways, I think it's important that we have these conversations. I can talk a little bit about the court situation if you want, or we can talk about homeschooling, because I mean the homeschooling is probably more relevant for people because of we're
Yeah.
approaching the fall season, and most
Well,
parents have decided. Yeah, go ahead.
I would just, yeah, let's stick on this topic that we're talking about just for a second, and then I would like to kind of segue. I have heard that homeschooling actually is on the rise. I think people are starting to get turned on to the fact, especially with all the BS that's happening, and they're thinking about sending their kids back to school. But I just wanted to mention, because you were on this terrorism topic, that I do think that clearly they're trying to push people who are taking an alternative view about the COVID narrative into this domestic terrorism rubric, and then they're going to try to be passing. I think the January 6th thing is pushing Congress into passing these domestic terrorism bills. It's just going to make them easier to have another kind of legal tool to be able to take people that are disagreeing with the COVID narrative and start locking them up. And clearly, the other thing I was going to mention is I find a lot of times, I think you're exactly right in calling them the terrorists. First of all, what kind of leaders lead through fear? As you're talking about, leaders should lead through love and hope, and not go straight to the most frightening, possibility or potential. And all we've been, for the last year and a half is hammered and hammered with the most frightening messaging that you could ever imagine, which is throwing people into fight or flight. They're scared out of their minds, scared of having somebody just breathing around them, scared of getting a hug. I mean, what a tool. For these authoritarians, it's a tool of totalitarianism, and it should be a huge red flag for anyone who's not, you know, debate is healthy. So let's have a public debate. I mean, I don't think, you or I or any of the scientists or doctors that agree with us on these topics or have been backing down from public debate, but they won't do it. And they're not doing it on any of the corporate media channels. And, I think maybe like you're talking about, like these local news guys sometimes do slip an alternative perspective in there because they have a little bit more leeway. I think once you get onto the corporate networks, man, you got to do what you're told, or else they got another person to fill that position right quick. So,
Yep.
but the fact that there's not public debate and it's not being fostered in a healthy way, that should be a huge red flag for people. And instead, it's not. So
Mhm.
it's just, I mean, it's turning into an upside down world as far as I can tell, where the opposite of what they're telling us is almost always the truth, actually. And it's so frustrating that they have such control over the mainstream media and the education, so that people are just conditioned to accept what they tell us.
Right. Yep. Critical thinking is the skill of the future, for adults and for young people.
Yeah.
And that is to think of who benefits from this narrative, who's funding this reporter. And they don't teach this. This is basic fundamentals. Remember, in war, it's the victors who write the history books. So whoever won, they get to write the history book. So what about the guys that lost? What's being told about them?
Yeah.
Well, you have to go back and look at the primary sources of the journalists or historians for the other side so you can put together what really happened. And if you can't think for yourself, you're toast. And so this is where you can see a small library behind me, but I'm trying to expand my mind, expand my ability to understand concepts, to articulate concepts, because I want to know the truth for my kids and my grandkids and nephews, nieces, and the next generation. Because this whole scamdemic didn't just unfold in the last 18 months. It has been a buildup. And I was so shocked to hear about the 1986 Vaccine Injury Act that protects vaccine manufacturers. I said,
Right.
holy Lord, 30 years plus
Crazy.
stuff going on here, man. Like, what is going on? So that's when I started to get like really urgent about it, because I did meet Brandy Vaughn, and she told me in 2015 in my face, they have a pipeline of 300 vaccines and they want to vaccinate everybody. So I didn't know it was going to come this fast. I saw the kids were in the crosshairs, but I didn't see everybody in the crosshairs. But she was correct, and that's what time it is. It's time to know that their agenda at the highest level is to dehumanize people, depopulate people, and their greatest fear is you awakening up to your own power and connecting with somebody. And you and I are doing something right now that me and some friends discovered this year called the power of two. So we would go shopping with two people. We would go do activism, do free hugs, do anything with two people, because by ourselves, we're a little bit shaky. We don't know what's going to happen.
Sure.
But with you and I, we go shopping, we go maskless shopping, and somebody tries to force something on us. We say, no, we prefer not to, or no, thank you, I have an exemption. And then they have one employee and two people. So they're like, now they're outnumbered, right? And so if you go three people, 4 or 5, more people. I participated in something called Operation Cash Drop in Trader Joe's. We had like 16, 17, 18 people that got like 3 million views and, went
Right.
viral and stuff. And I just text somebody. This is a funny conversation from Virginia today. I won't say his name, but I was calling up, making a payment on something today, and I kind of said something to break the ice about this whole vaccine issue, and I was kind of seeing where this customer service agent was.
Right.
And she was like, and so I said, yeah, I just believe in freedom of choice. And she's like, yeah, me too. And I said, great. So she said, I kind of mentioned when I'm talking to you, and she said, oh, my husband is thinking about doing this kind of operation where you just go into the store, take a few items, drop the cash. That's not stealing. And so, I got connected with him, and we'll see if he does it or not. But
Funny.
Because this whole thing is not about a vaccine, it's not about the mask, it's not about your safety, it's about obedience to authority at all costs. And this is the crazy part now, is that now we've had the mask thing for 12 months, the vaccine for maybe 6 months or so, and now people still have to wear their mask. So it's starting even to piss off some of the statists who are like, why did I get the vaccine? And what, like, do they work? Do the vaccines? I think I get the second booster and the third booster and the Delta variant and the Lambda variant and the,
Right.
Gamma, whatever, Infinity boosters coming next. So the people are starting to awaken. I think it really is like a horse race for freedom or slavery. And, we can continue to grow and expand as we shine our light and have these conversations about freedom of choice, and I even have some buddies who are like, yeah, I'm anti-vaccine. I'm like, dude, I'm not. If you want to inject sugar or poison, into your body, this goes back to the self-ownership principle, right? I wouldn't recommend you inject heroin or AstraZeneca vaccines or anything else, sugar in your bloodstream. But this is your gift from nature, man. This body is yours, given to you by God or creator or source, whatever you believe. So that's up to you. Now you got to take 100% responsibility for that. So there is the paradox there.
Yeah.
But it is the common ground, I think, between even the statists, left-right paradigm people, people who are waving the flag and saying Trump, or, even calling out Biden, or, whatever they want to do. I'm like, just don't force me, coerce me, threaten me.
Yeah.
And then we can agree. That sounds like a fair deal, right?
If you are listening to this, you are listening to the first free hour of The Shift with Doug McKenty. For access to the full feature-length versions of the podcast, go to www.theshiftnow.com and subscribe for the audio version for just $6 a month. Access the full-length episodes in video form through rockfin.com by subscribing at the Shift with Doug McKenty landing page. For $9.99 a month, you gain access not only to The Shift, but also all other premium content material hosted on the platform. Detoxify your body, decolonize your mind, make the shift.
Would you just touch on the concept of intergenerational freedom then? And then I promise I'll let you go, but I think it would be a great concept to wrap it up on, because it has so much to do with this idea of education, and then being educating, your kids, but then like even over the course of generations, this deprogramming process that can happen that can really alter your whole family unit for generations.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's would be wise for mom and dads out there, and uncles, aunts, grandparents, to start thinking about creating a legacy for your life. And that doesn't necessarily mean money, although money's great, and we welcome abundance, but a legacy of trust, of respect, of freedom of choice, of allowing them to live their own life. But the intergenerational aspect of it is that if we want to live in a free world, we need freedom leaders, and that's not like the political leaders. I'm talking about action takers, people who are artists, musicians, entrepreneurs, media people, communicators, conflict resolution leaders, farmers. I mean, these are the work. We are literally going to build our own private city, private villages, one at a time. Because, as I mentioned, I don't feel safe around these neighbors because most of them are super statists. And if the government comes knocking and says, "Where's this person who hasn't been vaccinated?" "Oh, he's over there."
Right.
But if you're in a voluntary neighborhood, voluntary village, there's already protocol discussed. And if some armed government agent comes, we have already discussed how we're going to deal with this. And we're going to deal with peace initially and wish them well and have them go on their way. But it takes an intention to think 30 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now. And this is the importance of lifelong learning, because there's one thing that I know, and that is life is changing always. And if we want to be participating in it and contributing to the evolution of human consciousness, then we would be wise to learn and apply and learn other things and apply things, and then create books or media as you're doing. What you're doing is so important, because this is the rhetoric aspect of it, where you're actually, it's not me and you just talking, having some coffee here. We're creating something so that other people can listen, and that they can go create something. So we're actually creating a wave in consciousness. And because it's digital and because you own the platform, there's no limitations. Whereas the CNN or NBC, right, they own the rights. Or let's say a musician out there who makes great music, but the record company owns the rights, which is a great conversation for intellectual property another day.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing is that having a bigger vision, understanding, hey, I'm raising someone who is going to impact the world because they are unique. And I see the scam of government. I see the agenda for totalitarianism, and I'm not participating. I'm not handing my child over to you people who are going to teach that war is a solution to something and that the government has authority over you. And you got to get permission to get a drink of water. I'm not going to hand my child over to you. So what are you going to do? I'm going to demonstrate to my child. I'm going to be human, right? There's no need to try to be perfect. Okay. When you make mistakes, tell your children, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
And later, when they're an adult, they'll say, I remember when I was 6 or when I was 10, and, dad or mom did this. They crashed the car, they broke something, and they didn't hide it, because mistakes are not the problem in real life. Only in state schools are mistakes the problem, and only in state schools is failure a problem. But in the adult world of growth, achievement, success, and happiness, mistakes are your best teacher sometimes, where you learn, oh, what worked, what didn't work,
For sure.
what can I try again? So this is some of the aspect of thinking long-term, multi-generational, intergenerational, because these guys have made their intergenerational plans. So I think for freedom lovers out there, start thinking of your own agenda 2030,
Yeah.
vision
Right on.
2050, right? And
Yeah.
this is what I talk about on my show, the Freedom Lover Show, with the tagline, building a voluntary world, one relationship at a time, because that's what it is. You know, we can't boil the ocean, we can't save all the people, but in our own sphere of influence, our own family, our own friends, we can. In our neighborhood, we can. We can take flyers and go around to neighbors, which I'm probably going to be doing here once some of these court issues simmer down a little bit, but then go do some guerrilla marketing and educate people about voluntarism. One of the great principles is that we're all equal, man. I'm not going to try to force you to do something. I just ask that you don't force me to do something. Fair enough, because it's such a great, solid, consistent principle and ethical approach that eventually it will catch, as it's catching now. I gave you the story about the first in Acapulco. It is a worldwide awakening of self-ownership and non-aggression. Killing people is not a solution to anything, really, unless they're like coming after you. But initiating, going to their land, dropping bombs on them. I can't even believe, you know, atomic bomb and stuff like that. It's like, holy smokes, man. So I would encourage parents out there to remove your children. And, you know, if you want to get some support, you can email me at info@homeschoolleader.com. GattoProject.com will be launching shortly. It'll be a membership site where you can actually go on there, pay maybe $7 a month or, you know, $10 a month, whatever we're going to charge, and get access to some of the greatest wisdom about schools, about education, so that when your family asks you, what about socialization? What about curriculum? What about all these things? What about math and science and language? You can say, oh, and you can just have a nice, nonchalant, low stress answer, because we're standing on the truth. And that is, we all want to learn. And I love what Buckminster Fuller said. He said, every child's a born genius. The challenge is they get de-geniused trying to please their teachers and please their parents. So step into that possibility that you are brilliant, and not saying that like some cliche or like literally, you know, we are not using much of our brain cell capacity. And, you know, it's really been a great time to sit with you and talk to you, Doug, and maybe we'll do another show and, you know, come back on, take some questions or something, and
sounds good.
We'll work this out. But yeah, it's been a great time, Doug. I can tell you're a very conscious father, and great to know you. And yeah, people can reach out. And if you have any other last comments, man, I'm happy to answer any questions or anything like that. But it's been a great show, man. I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, right on. Likewise, man. I really appreciate your work. This homeschooling angle, I think, is one of the most important. And so the Freedom Lovers Show and the GattoProject.com are those the two places I should send people in the show notes?
Yep. Homeschoolleader.com as well. And
okay, great.
There's a Facebook group there, and I'm on Telegram as well. So yeah, you can find me there. And I'm also on, I got deleted off of Instagram, but I'm at Freedom Lovers Show. Yeah. And Twitter at Principal DJR.
Well, cool, David. Yeah, thanks again for coming on. Great conversation. Again, all the information about the homeschooling issue. I hope, and actually, I know that more and more people are going to do it. I feel like this is the future of where the movement's going. We're looking down the pipe here at a pretty segregated society, the vaxxed and the unvaxxed, and I can see a future actually where maybe that's not so bad. I mean, I'll be living in my voluntarist community, and I'll be helping homeschool all the kids in the community. And it doesn't, you know, so be it. I don't need the government or the corporate system. I think we're going to be able to figure out a way through this because in large part for the work of people like you. So thanks again. And I'll just let people know they've been listening to The Shift. I'm your host, Doug McKenty, and you can find all of my stuff at www.theshiftnow.com. Hours of free content. Sign up for the newsletter. theshiftnow.com is the place to go. And also, I've been putting a lot of my stuff up on the YouTube channel, but it's getting strikes. I don't know if this one's going to fly. So I've been leaning more on my Odyssey channel and also the Rockfin channel at rockfin.com under Doug McKenty, or at The Shift Now on Rockfin is actually a great place to see all the videos. And I'm on SoundCloud at The Shift with Doug McKenty. And actually the most action I'm getting on social media right now is my personal Facebook page, which seems to be less shadow banned than everything else. So you can just look me up at Doug McKenty on Facebook and catch me there. So thanks again, David, for coming on. Thanks everybody for checking this one out, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Take care. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. That was my conversation with activist David Rodriguez. I've been wanting to have a homeschooler on for a long time. The conversation about education really needs to happen, I think, and as things are progressing here, we're seeing with the mandates and whatnot happening in schools, a huge uptick in interest in homeschooling. So it was really good timing to have David on the show. I did interview John Taylor Gatto once years ago before he passed away, and I will, I think, put that episode in the show notes so you can check that out as well. John Taylor Gatto's work is just phenomenal in terms of this. He was a teacher of the year in New York, actually, and taught in New York for a couple of decades, I think 30 plus years, before he finally just got sick of it because he really didn't have the freedom within the institution to educate children in the way that he believed they needed to be educated, which was to help to cultivate their critical thinking facilities. So much of public school these days is essentially indoctrination. Students are taught to follow the authority figure, regurgitate what they've been told, and if they're not given the correct information, or if maybe they hold a different interpretation, then they are graded accordingly. So I actually urge people, if you haven't listened to this one, my interview with Donald Jeffries on bullyocracy is really important to this topic as well, because we discussed a lot of the trauma in terms of the social environment in the public school systems, just from the bullying alone from the school, from other kids in the school. I think you add on top of that the grading systems, the needing to ask permission to go to the restroom, to feed yourself, the total institutionalization of the child that's going through that process, then you do have a traumatic situation, and many of us have been affected by that experience, and not in a positive way. And certainly a lot of us then are trained through the trauma bond into the rest of the patriarchal system. I mean, this is why I view it a lot as more indoctrination than education, actually. So I'm really happy to have David on the program to be able to discuss his ideas about alternative ways to educate. We talked a lot about self-directed learning or unschooling, which is something that I did with my two kids, and really just had phenomenal results. It's actually amazing what happens when you give children the freedom to decide what they're interested in, and you just don't have to fight with them all the time. You're not fighting with them to make them learn stuff that they don't care about. Instead, you're just encouraging them to learn things that they do, and all of the basics get covered. Whatever your child is interested in, they have to read to learn more about it, so they learn how to read. If they have to learn some mathematics to be able to figure it out, then they're going to go there. They're learning how to type because they want to get on the computer and look things up about what they're interested in. And so it was just amazing to watch really a very holistic education occur because of a handful of interests that my children had over the course of the unschooling experience. And it's great to have people like David out there who are helping families, not just with unschooling, but also if you choose, other methodologies, apprenticeship programs, and things like that can really help. I also think it's important these days to think about starting homeschool co-ops. So networks like David, hopefully he'll develop this with the Gatto Project, networking with other homeschooling families, creating communities that that can really help each other out, because I know a lot of times people don't want to do it because, they have to go to work. They don't have the time to do it, but certainly we can figure out a way. when there's a will, there's a way. Another thing that David brought up, we talked about it not too much, but briefly, was the idea of voluntarist communities, which seems to be becoming more and more important these days. I think a lot of people are trying to move away from the mandates that are happening, certainly in the big cities and within large corporate settings or government settings, and just having the opportunity to move away, create our own communities outside of the system. This kind of harkens back to my conversation, if you're interested in the concept of agorism, with Sal Mayweather, that was just 2 weeks ago. You can check that one out, because I think it's looking like there might be actually a pretty severe segregation unless people stand up and deal with this now. And those of us who are more voluntary oriented are going to have to find different ways of doing things. So knowledge of homeschooling is a big part of it. So anyway, again, really happy to have David on the show. This education aspect of things is, of course, very central to our lifestyle, and freedom in education is important to breaking away from the patriarchal structure as a whole. So I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I'll just let you know that you can find I think the best place to look for David's stuff right now is at the Freedom Lovers Show on YouTube. He's posting stuff pretty regularly up there, and it encompasses the entirety of what he's been working on, which has been beyond the education thing, more actual civil disobedience and activism on the street concerning the mandates, and educating police officers, actually, as well as reporting on other aspects, including these voluntary societies. So if you want to find out more about those communities, you can check out the Freedom Lovers Show. Very soon, he will have www.gattoproject.com up and running. So as you're interested in learning more about homeschooling, I would urge you to check that out. Again, anything based on John Gatto's work is going to be well worth your while. And I think also having that resource as a network, hopefully I'll be posting that actually on my own website, because I do want to help people who are interested in going the homeschool route. And another resource actually is to just check out Anarchapulco. I think David's been a speaker the last couple of years. And so you can find his speeches there. He's also been on Del Bigtree's show, and he was on the Higher Side Chats a few years ago. He's made a lot of public appearances, so you'll be able to find information about him. So thanks for checking this one out. Again, a very important topic, and you can catch all of my stuff at www.theshiftnow.com. My personal Facebook page is kind of the place to go. I'm trying to get people to find my Rockfin channel. If you look up at The Shift Now on Rockfin, you'll find all of my videos. We don't have to worry so much about the censorship there. Some of my stuff is on YouTube at The Shift with Doug McKenty. I also have an Odyssey channel. My personal Facebook page, Doug McKenty, is the place to go to communicate. But think about going to theshiftnow.com and signing up for the newsletter, because that's the safest way. And I'll keep you informed as to everything that I produce out of Doug McKenty Studios. And think about subscribing to the show. That $6 a month keeps the shift going, and you get access to the long form interviews. So thanks everybody for listening, and we will catch you again very soon. My next interview will be with reporter, journalist Allison Morrow, and I'm really looking forward to that one, because everybody asks that question, well, how can all the reporters be in on it? How are they all in on this grand conspiracy to report propaganda? And I think Allison's going to give us some answers to that coming up next week. So stay tuned for that one, and I will see you all soon. Thanks for listening.